On defensive tackle, Daniel Jeremiah had this about the upcoming NFL draft, that last year he graded 12 defensive tackles as starters, like guys that could be NFL starters. Last year's class, he put 12 starter grades down.
Okay.
And this year, right now, he has 24 starting defensive tackle grades.
Okay.
So it's a loaded defensive tackle class, if that's something that interests you. And that clip there from John Ledyard coming back, all right, so copycat league, every once in a while we get to this. It's always true that if you can get to the quarterback rushing 4, you should want to do that. Is that new? Is anybody acting like that is new?
That's not new.
That's not new.
That's how the Giants beat Brady in their first Super Bowl.
They
just rushed 4 with Tuck, Umanura, and Strahan and whatever, and they got there.
The Bucs did it to Mahomes and the other one. So every 7 years, it happens twice, and the football world says, "Oh, I mean, look at this." Well, I think a lot of these teams are going to try and get there with 4. Like, well, yeah. It's the same as hoping to have a franchise quarterback. Everybody wants to have that. It's not exactly easy to get.
Right.
To just get there with 4. Haven't the Bills known this and tried this the whole time? They've spent tons of assets on defensive ends.
Even without the group, they've tried to be that. Like they're not a team that they've had their moments. They're not a team that's been like super blitz heavy.
No, in fact, if I'm thinking, was it a Ram game? Was it the opener 3 years ago now, where they beat Stafford and the Rams with no blitzes? It was one of the Sunday's Super Bowl was one of 3 no blitz games in the last however many years, and the Bills have one of those. They might even have 2.
They might have had one this year. Did they have one against the Jets? Maybe.
They don't blitz. They want to get there with 4 if they can, and when you can't get there with 4 is when you maybe start to. So I don't know that I've got any takeaway from this Eagles win for the Bills. What they have to do that's different is they have to hit. Because Rousseau, is that a hit? Sure. He's a nice player. That's not a miss. But that year they draft Boogie Basham, and that's definitely a miss. They traded him away for next to nothing.
Yep.
Epinesa is a guy that plays, and that's fine. Second-round pick. You probably would be, if Epinesa was a 5th-round pick, you'd be really happy about it. But a second-round pick, like, okay, that's a guy.
Would he play on the Eagles, though?
He might be in the rotation, I guess. I don't know.
He certainly wouldn't start. Like, he's fine. He's fine.
He's a guy.
You want a hell-raising unit like the Eagles, though? You want to be better. The guys that are on the field, I think you want to be better than A.J. Epinesa.
But on the Garrett thing, isn't Garrett a little bit like, if you'll go with me here, Saquon Barkley in some level, where it's a different position, of course, which is why you're going to have to give up more to get him. But why are Barkley's teams before him not any good? Well, it's not his fault. He's amazing, and you can only do so much. When you plug him in as the final piece to an offense, which the Eagles did, you got the most out of him you could.
Mm-hmm.
And for Garrett, every single team should want him. And if you are the Titans and you get him, what should you expect? About, 5 wins? And an awesome defensive end.
Yeah.
And if you're the Bills and you add him, what should you expect? Probably about 14 wins and an awesome defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole point about good players playing together and having as many good players as possible. While there should be 31 teams that should try to go get Garrett, there are probably 5 teams that should really try to get him. And the Bills are on that list.
Yeah.
Because I don't need all these draft picks. I can't think of a price. I'm not ready to say I can't think of a price I wouldn't pay, but what is the argument against it? No, we shouldn't. We should just use a couple more picks instead. Aren't the Bills some version? You've got fantasy football teams like this. You have 5 receivers that are all really good.
Yep.
You should trade 3 of them for Jamar Chase.
Yes.
That's what you should do.
Yes.
Because you have a spot on your roster that you'd like to get the best player possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I have that, I've lifted every other position up. I can fill in much more easily. Instead of these first-round picks I'm going to trade away, instead of hoping they turn into Myles Garrett, boom, I have Myles Garrett. Now I'll use the picks that I still have to fill in and hope to find a Rousseau-level guy in the second round or the third round or...
For the Bills, I mean, they pick
Solomon,
up
whatever,
contributors in the 5th, 6th, and 7th often.
Yeah. I think the Garrett thing is almost as easy a fit as you could ask for. Or if you want it to be Crosby or, Khalil Mack is cheaper because he's probably not as productive. He's older.
And you don't have to trade for him.
Right. Just a contract. So that could be an answer. But one of these big fish at the defensive end position seems to me like a really good idea. What Khalil Mack sounds like, though, to be honest, doesn't Khalil Mack sound a lot like Leonard Floyd? Doesn't Khalil Mack sound a lot like
Yeah.
Mario Addison. Like, this guy's had a
little
really
bit.
good career. He's at the end. Will he take 1 year, $10 million? And Mac probably gets more than that because he's still been pretty good.
Well, what about the guy from Sunday? What about Josh Sweat? He's 27. And he was incredible on Sunday. He's got okay numbers. Like, it's not Garrett, right? Like, and this is just sacks, but 8, 6.5, 11, 7.5. Like, that's his last 4 years. Like, he's good.
That's pretty good.
He's a pretty good player.
And what did he have on Sunday? He had a guard. He had a guard playing left tackle.
Yeah.
I mean,
and he has the benefit of Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams. Like, he has destroyers pushing the pocket back where Mahomes has nowhere to go. And like, I'm not taking all credit away from Sweat. I'm just assuming it's easier to be an edge rusher when those dudes are in the middle.
Yep.
And he was able to get home. So he's a good player. That's a big contract, though, isn't it? Like, that's almost like, I'm not saying this makes it a bad idea. Does that feel like a move like the Drought Bills would have made? Like, guy that had 8 sacks, and we're going to be the team that go, like, remember when they signed Mario Williams, but didn't they sign another guy that same year?
Yes.
Who had like no production, but they had signed him to a big deal because he had 1 year.
Patriots, Mark Anderson?
Is
that right, Mark Anderson?
That's the name. They signed him the same offseason to like another big money deal.
Yeah.
And that was more like, okay, this is more what the Bills do. This guy's got, like, he'll get 6.5, 7 sacks. Sweat, though, might be better than that. I don't know, like, what his win rates are, and, like, we're doing this a lot smarter now, I think, evaluating these players. But to me, any of these ideas, Sweat, Mac, Crosby's not this, but all of these sound to me like consolations for not getting Myles Garrett.
Yeah. Which,
like, Myles Garrett is the name, is the idea. I'm with you. Like, there's almost nothing, like, I guess maybe if you told me it would cost 3 first-round picks, maybe I start to get a little nervous. Yeah. But even I want it so bad because it feels like it's such a perfect idea that I'd almost be willing to do even that.
It's just not going to cost 3 first-round picks, though, because think about it. It gets back to who's willing to pay that. Everybody would like to have him. Would a team that's not going to win the Super Bowl and maybe not make the playoffs, they'd love to have Garrett help them get there. I'm not giving up 3 first-round picks. I don't even have a good team.
You're right.
Who can afford...
And that team might not think Garrett's going to sign with you in the first place.
Right.
And at that point, if he's not signing an extension, like New England in their office could say, yeah, we'd trade 3 first-round picks for Myles Garrett.
But where are we
then
getting?
Myles Garrett tells you I'm not signing an extension. They go, oh, yeah, we're not giving you 3 first-round picks.
Yeah. He wants to win a Super Bowl. So
right.
you limit it to the teams that can feasibly say, we can win you a Super Bowl in the next 2 years. And how many teams are there? 6? 10? Washington, Buffalo, Detroit. I mean, they have Aiden Hutchinson. He doesn't want to... Kansas City, maybe. They go to Kansas City. Max Crosby doesn't want to go to Kansas City, so take him off of we'll take them off of his list. It's just not the same.
The Packers.
Right. Are the Dolphins trying to convince Myles Garrett? Maybe not. I don't think they can feel like they can give up 3 first-round picks. So because the buyers are now down to maybe 10 teams, if he wants to go to a team that's going to win to extend, the price goes down. There just aren't as many buyers. And I just think the Bills should be, of course, way in on this. And I don't know, I'm not saying I'm not here to listen or to completely dismiss any arguments against it. Mm-hmm. It seems like, no, just use your picks instead. Okay.
Well, can they... The real good question here, because Garrett is a final piece type of idea. He's that good right now. The Eagles have a unit. Like, they have a bunch of guys that are all amazing, that are all good, at least. And the unit as a whole, like, there wasn't just one guy on Sunday that was ripping up the Chiefs' offensive line. Like, it was all of them. Milton Williams had 2 sacks on the game. Carter didn't even have a sack, and he was through almost, it felt like, every other play. Like, they had that. You want a 4-man pass rush. Is Garrett all it takes? And you feel like you're home?
Yes.
Like, because you're not... you don't have dominant players next to him, but Garrett... Almost like in hockey, like where you bring in a number 1 center and everybody kind of slots into the right position. Maybe a little bit for the Bills at receiver, too.
Right.
Like Cooper comes in and everybody kind of, now everybody is slotted in more to the spot that they probably need to be in. And if you bring in Garrett, I wonder how much more you get from the other guys. How much more does Rousseau give you? when he's not seeing double teams, half the time. Instead of 50% of the time he's seeing a double team, maybe now it's 15%. And how much better is Rousseau now because of that? Is
because Garrett gets double teamed more than anybody.
Yeah,
and
right.
still wins more than anybody.
Right. So, I would expect that you would hope his impact, his ability would positively affect the others. And that wouldn't even be to say you couldn't do other things. If they traded their first-round pick this year as part of a package to get Garrett, you've still got 2 second-round picks. Wouldn't we still be... If they trade for Garrett tomorrow, wouldn't we still be here saying, okay, now you go add another lineman in the second round? You got 2, so we can still do our receiver thing if you want. You can do something else, but they're not done. Go add another star defensive tackle. Not star, but go add a defensive tackle that you might realistically think could develop into a guy up the middle. Because that's the other thing. If you told me there was a Jalen Carter level guy available right now, that to me is almost as appealing as this star edge rusher idea. Because that's a thing the Bills haven't had. They've really tried, other than Oliver, right? We've talked about how they don't really invest much at defensive tackle. So I wonder what they would do if a guy like that, if a Chris Jones level defensive tackle became available, not an edge, would they do it?
How the Eagles get Jalen Carter?
He had off-field issues and they had a top 10 pick.
Yeah, and the Bills are not going to get a top 10 pick, right? You just can't get one of those.
No.
And you shouldn't expect to get one of those for what? The next, knock on wood, decade?
Yeah.
You're just not going to get those picks. So now you have to it's kind of like hoping you find your way to Justin Jefferson with the 22nd pick or TJ Watt with the 30th pick. You just have to get lucky enough to draft a guy and have everybody else miss on him in the first round.
Yeah.
Jalen Carter was off-field stuff. The Eagles had the ninth pick. Well, that helps.
How did they have the 9th pick?
There were a couple ways. In
2022, they weren't the 9th worst team in the league.
They made a trade with the Dolphins. I saw Ben Baldwin had this because there are 2 key players to what the Eagles did. And one of their picks actually goes all the way back to, remember when they lost the game by putting the backup in 2020 and everyone kind of freaked out? They slid up in the draft order by doing that. Of course, tank one game and move your pick up. And so they pulled Hurts in the fourth quarter of the final week of the 2020 season. They got the 6th pick for that. They moved back to 12 in exchange for the 2022 first. That's what they did.
Okay.
They moved back 6 spots in the draft. That's the other part of this. Have a bad year, parlayed into future firsts. Now, they bet on Miami being bad, and they pick 9th.
Yeah.
Not a bad job.
Because they picked Nolan Smith later that round. And he's another one of these guys that was amazing on Sunday.
Yeah.
And he's an edge rusher.
So they got there by trading down and getting a lot of value out of it.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between the Eagles and the Bills? The Bills have you were saying, the Eagles have a defense that plays like a unit. The Bills do that. They pride themselves on that. The difference is they just don't have the dudes that the Eagles do. The guys for the Bills are Milano, who's not on the field that much. He's hurt a lot. In the secondary, you got Benford. And on the defensive line, I want to say you might not have anybody right now that is just a flat-out player on the level that you need.